Hi, everybody. We're so happy you're here. Oh, this is bad. I agreed to do the clicker and I quit already.
Wait, I should click because I'm not holding a thing, right? Sorry, this is something we should have.
We're organized.
You got it?
Okay, good luck.
Okay.
Hey, my name is Eric McGriff. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the prevention coordinator at the Crime Victims Treatment Center. We offer free legal, medical, and therapeutic services to any person impacted by any violent crime at any point in their life. And as the prevention coordinator, I do K through 12, campus work, nightlife, engaging men, and I have a background in working with men who've committed domestic violence.
Okay, I'm Scarlett Thompson. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the New York City Alliance Against Sexual Assault. Yeah, let's go Alliance! I see you. They're all here. I do OutSmart Nightlife programming with Amy and Eric at CVTC, but then I also run our teen programming, Project Dream Own Tell, Project Dodd, which we love. So I am a nightlife and teen preventionist, educator, and I have an arts background. If you couldn't tell, I was a drama major.
Hi, I'm Amy Northup. I'm using she, her pronouns today, and I work for OutSmartNYC. We are a collective I'll tell you more about in a second. I also work as an intimacy coordinator. Did anybody go to that one a few minutes ago? So I work in film and television as an intimacy coordinator. The reason we've all mentioned the other sectors that we work in outside of nightlife is that we're going to be talking a lot about nightlife today, but we are doing that as a framework of things that you can implement into other sectors. We have all done that. I've very much kind of taken this work and made it applicable to a completely different industry. They've taken these things to make them work with different communities. So we can offer some things from like all sorts of different perspectives here. Okay. I'm so glad I'm not clicking.
All right. Okay. Oh my God, our first question is already exposed. Don't look at it yet. Okay, we're gonna find out who's in the room because there are a million people at this conference and everybody's doing a million different things. So I'm gonna say who here works in X, and if you wanna raise your hand, you can give a woo, like however you wanna show your love or general enjoyment for what you do. Maybe not love always. So who here works in violence prevention? Yeah.
Okay.
Preventionists in the room. Beautiful. And direct response? Any advocates? Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay. Beautiful. Love the work that you do. Who here is in a leadership position? Okay. Wait, yeah, let's see.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. Love all the leaders here. Does anyone here work in nightlife violence? I know you do. Yeah. All right, a little bit in the back, a little bit. We all do a little bit of different types of prevention.
Or have worked or have done nightlife curriculums. Yeah. Let's see that if you're not doing them currently.
Okay, cool. And anyone work in nightlife? That's okay. No. We're really hopeful, but I know nonprofit work is already a lot of work, so I'm glad you're not also a server.
So a little bit about where we're headed today. We're going to talk with you all at the beginning about who we are, what we do as OutSmart NYC, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what our prevention programming is and the questions we've learned to ask on our journey of creating safer nightlife spaces. After that, we're going to get into the real meat of it, or tofu of it. I discriminate. And we're going to talk about building equity through community engagement, curriculum development, and equitable facilitation. And then we're going to end with brainstorming and debriefing with you all.
Woo. Let's talk about OutSmart. So, OutSmart NYC, we are a collective of industry staff, patrons, educators, and activists organizing to prevent and end sexual violence in bars, restaurants in New York City nightlife. This is a joint effort between service providers and members of the nightlife community, which allows us to draw upon the collective knowledge, lived experience, and expertise of various subcommittees. So let's get into that a little bit more. Let's talk about why we work in nightlife and why we do this work in nightlife. Has anybody here been to a bar in the last couple weeks? See hands? Yeah, okay. How about a restaurant? Yeah, club? sex party? Just kidding, you don't have to declare that, but we're gonna talk about it. So this is really specific in New York too. I will then ask that question. Has anybody walked down the street from the subway to their home? Because particularly in our city, do I have New Yorkers? Let's see New Yorkers, raise their hands. Yeah. So you're a part of New York City nightlife. A lot of times this is something that people are like, oh no, I don't go out, I don't go dancing, I don't go to clubs, and so that has nothing to do with me. I'm just annoyed by the bar down the street that's loud at 4 a.m. But I think this is something that like we are all a part of this industry, even if we're not in the most extreme parts of it. We click. So nightlife is where culture and community are built and sustained, no matter what that means. That really could be at underground parties, that can be at house parties, that can be at a restaurant. These are the places that we meet and gather. So by integrating norms of consent and anti-oppression into those nightlife and community spaces, we are initiating widespread culture change. We really believe that bartenders and servers and those people are on the front lines of culture change and really have the ability to marinate everybody in this work. Also, I forgot to mention that I'm like a longtime bartender. I started with the intimacy thing. I come from nightlife, so I worked as a bartender, as a manager in various states, but mostly in New York. So people come to my work when they're done at their work. So they behave in their 9 to 5. We inherently work in a non-professional setting, and we need tools to deal with that. It's amazing because we are the places that people come to be their whole selves. And in traditionally like queer spaces like that, like that's amazing and that's great. And these are the places that we create to be safe with one another. But it also means that like we're getting the full picture, and we don't have the same kind of like HR structure as a lot of workplaces. You wanna do one more? And lastly, we know that there's a really pervasive cultural belief that, well, how much did you drink? Well, they were drinking, what did they expect? Even in nightlife, that's really prevalent. So if we can get in there and do the work of like, alcohol doesn't cause violence, value systems causes violence, and we all have every right to drink as much as we want, look like a hoe as much as we want, and do as many drugs as we want, and none of that is consent, then that's, again, marinating in widespread change. Among other things, but those are sort of the basics. Okay, so let's talk about this. Anybody, okay, so nobody here has worked in nightlife before, however, oh wait, did I see a hand for some nightlife? Okay, good, okay, you have in the past. Was anybody ever asked to watch, like on an onboarding, asked to watch one of those like horrid sexual harassment videos with the like, oh, hello there by the water cooler. You're looking so nice today. It's horrible. It doesn't apply to our industry. And when that is our only approach to this work, it is easy and it is immediate that we go, this is a joke. It doesn't apply to us, and it actually escalates bad behavior. For the next like 3 or 4 days after we've had to have our like sexual harassment talk at our pre-shift meeting, like everybody's a lot more grab-assy and joking and being like, oh, is this sexual harassment? So like not only does it not help, not only does it not give us tools to actually apply prevention and harassment training in our venues, it actually escalates harm. This is not just like the bad corporate HR. This is also like, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but like cookie cutter, one size fits all, the curriculum has to be executed the same way in each venue. It doesn't work. It doesn't actually apply to every venue. Even if it is like the foundations are there, we need to adapt the trainings in every space that we're in. And we will talk more about that in a bit. Everything that we do is co-created and co-facilitated with members of each expertise. So we don't do OutSmart trainings without, like, it's been Eric and I for a very long time, and now Scarlett, thank God. So everything is co-facilitated by someone who is in the industry. And all of our curriculums are created by people who are in the industry. This allows us to do real-time cultural translation. So Eric says something brilliant in preventionist language, and I go, all right, so here's the dumb shit that means for nightlife. Like, next one, Eric. Okay, sorry, yes, we not only curriculum is co-created, we are also, the trainings are all co-facilitated. Intersectional and reality-based, like we're not gonna talk about sexual violence without also talking about gender and race and documentation status, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's also reality-based in that what I'm talking about is that we're going to talk about drug use, we're going to talk about sex work, we're gonna talk about the things that are actually happening in our space, and we're gonna talk about it in the language and in the style that is culturally relevant to our space, because we know that if we don't, it shuts our community off and goes, this doesn't apply to us. We can't make this work for us. The collective is our nightlife arm. So we'll talk about this a little bit more detail in a moment, but this is a core part of our belief that we have partners in this work. One of our partners is Crime Victims Treatment Center right now. Another is the Alliance, and the collective is our nightlife arm. So this is where we have our people who are our nightlife professionals who are actually still on the ground working in nightlife who are involved in the work consistently. And not just in a like focus group for a moment.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about, well, how do we do this? We're gonna get into so many more details later, so I'm gonna do this fairly quickly, but also trying to pace my speech because I tend to talk quickly. We all do. So when we honestly, our capacity right now is us. So when we are typically not doing a ton of outreach right now to new bars, we get a lot of requests. So right now we're really just responding to requests that we get from nightlife venues. But the first thing we do is when they reach out, we say, okay, cool, would love to work with you. We're gonna come in. We talk to like a manager. We try to go when there are staff members around. So we're like, oh, we're gonna come and meet with the manager. And then we like sit at the bar and we're like, so how do you like working here? And it's, yeah, we kind of get the tea like in a more, informal way. But we also do an anonymous survey sent out to staff that's totally optional, but it just says like, what's the vibe of your venue? Is there anything you want covered in this training? And if someone has something to say, then they'll fill it out. And the environmental scan is, we walk around, we say, where can you not reach on a busy night? Like, where are the holes? Who are you not seeing? That kind of stuff. We adapt the curriculum then based on the very specific needs of the venue. So if we're going to like, we'll have a staff member fill out the survey that says like, I am a trans person who works here and I'm constantly misgendered by my coworkers. Then we'll be like, oh, okay, we're gonna do a big section on pronouns and gender identity. And so it's really tailored to what they're saying they need in the space.
Can I just add one thing? It's also tailored to the space, right? So the intervention strategies that we bring to a group are going to be very, very different in a quiet downtown Brooklyn community diner space where the staff really has the opportunity to engage with their guests versus a really loud nightclub where it's very, very dark, it's very loud. The only information the staff has is body language and they can't even talk to each other. And then you add like cultural translation to it of like a bar in Harlem is going to have a different relationship to gentrification in their community versus a Dominican bar in Queens. Like we have to be mindful of all of these factors as we are adapting our training and thinking about what we're going to focus more or less on in each space.
Yes, and we'll talk too about how we pick facilitators based on that as well. We bring the training to them, we go to their bar, we hang out, we often stay afterwards and hang out with the staff. Like it's really, we come to your space and we get to know you in that space. We are constantly pulling these nightlife people. We finish a training and we say, if you want to do this, if you want to facilitate, email us, DM us, and that's how we build the collective, which we'll talk more about. We also do, as much as we can, connecting to resources and incident response. Again, like the nightlife community that I'd like to say a lot of the bars we work with don't want to call 911 and also don't know of any alternatives to calling the cops. So we do our best to help them find alternatives and also just like to build community within a block so that, different nightlife owners and managers within a community are working together to create community safety. And that entails a lot of just us asking people, like, what do you do in your space, and how can we provide that here? And then, Eric's at CVTC, which does like free therapy, and we have a massive resource guide. So it's really connecting the nightlife industry to all the things that we all know in the prevention field that exist, but that they are not hearing anything about when they're onboarded or hired or trained, anything like that.
So it's also really integral to our, we are not just showing up once telling you how to do things and leaving. We are investing in ongoing relationships, which means that we do have to bridge the gap between prevention and response. We do have to have things that when incidents happen, I jump on the phone with an owner and I help them figure out the language that they can use to respond, or refer them to resources that are not me. We're learning.
So we're just going to go over some quick definitions for the rest of our conversation. This first one is from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and we define equity as the means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their full health potential, and that no one is disadvantaged, excluded, or dismissed from achieving this point. And so for us, we know that equity is about groups and it's about systems. And it requires us to acknowledge historical barriers and inequities that disproportionately impact certain groups more than others, such as racism, sexism, homophobia. And so for us, our approach to equity centers those with the greatest need and the least access to support. And the great opportunity we have for that is that if you can develop solutions that are more workable for folks who have the highest need and least access, it's easier to replicate those with folks who have relatively more resources and access. So there's a lot of benefits from centering those communities.
Do you want this?
Sorry, I turned it off. No, I'm okay. Thank you.
She memorized it.
Theater kid. I love these animations, Amy. Oh my God, you went all the way off with they're so fun. Okay. Sorry, I'm easily distractible.
ADHD.
Okay. So we are not perfect. We are not the experts. If anything, the Nightlife folks are the experts, and there are no experts in this work. We have learned everything that we're sharing today through massive trial and error, and we are still failing all the time to serve people, to do things right. So that's just a preface to say we are doing this with a lot of humility, I hope. But in this process, and in bringing certain curriculums to spaces and nightlife people saying, this isn't working, we don't like this, get out, we've learned to ask certain questions about our prevention program. And I can say, as someone who also runs, works in teen programming, it is all translatable to what I do in teen programming. So hopefully these questions that we ask of our program will be helpful for you in your programs. And then we're gonna get into 3 core components, but we'll start with the questions.
Cool. Okay, so does the programming acknowledge specific environmental factors that impact consent? So for us in Nightlife, this is drugs, alcohol, sex work, stigmatization of all of that. As we mentioned, the environmental realities of it. Can you stop and check in and say, are you okay with someone if it is a Saturday night and your service bar tickets are 30 deep and you can't hear anything? So we need to be aware of the environmental concerns of the industry as we do these.
And we also learned about time and the resources it requires. I mean, one of the first things that became clear when we started doing this work, the consistent point of feedback, was that your 4-hour curriculum is too long. It's inaccessible. Nightlife workers in New York City work 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. And then you want them to come in 5 hours early because they got to travel to do a 4-hour training. Who's paying for that? Because they're not getting paid for it, right? And so we do get many managers who will buy pizza. That's usually what it is. You get some pizza for coming in early. But there are also other considerations. A lot of these folks work at multiple venues, right? This isn't a traditional 9 to 5. So while we're doing our training, someone else is on shift at another venue. We also have to think about the people in this space. They don't have benefits. They don't have part-time off, right? They don't have things like health insurance, right? And when they go to work is when all of us who are there to help them are off work and going to their spaces, right? So there's limited access even. So that's one of the reasons we've had to learn to change our resources, to offer a menu of options, shorten our curricula, and change the way that we engage the community so it's super accessible and relevant and tailorable to them.
Woo. What is the vibe of facilitation? Are you using really lofty, really academic language in the room? This is not, and I feel like this is very important to say, this is not about people in nightlife being dumb, and it's really not helpful if we come in with an infantilizing mindset. This is about culture. These are people that have PhDs. They're like the people who helped us develop the original curriculum are like, is a PhD and is a bartender.
They have PhDs in like queer nightlife safety.
Yeah, this is not about talking down to. This is about like, I'm gonna say fuck in the first 5 minutes of our facilitation because it says like, hi, we can be human here, and we can talk about things as they actually are in our spaces. And that tool of language and how we're talking is a really, really big component of like Adrienne Marie Brown, move at the speed of trust. If you're coming in, how are we moving at the speed of trust, and how are we talking to each other in a way that is like, yeah, we're in this together, we just have shared expertise, as opposed to that like, I am coming in to teach you something, and I'm going to talk about evidence-based, and I'm going to talk, what? Okay. I still don't know what it means.
And who are we framing as the survivors? This is so relevant in every single program that we implement, and this has several different considerations when we talk about nightlife. One, so many, like historically, nightlife prevention curriculums focus on patron-to-patron harm. We know, especially in freaking New York City, the nightlife industry is made up of overwhelmingly queer, BIPOC, immigrant, like non-native English speaker communities. And we know that they are at extremely high risk of being harmed. So when we come in, you know, we say the survivors and the people who are vulnerable here are not just the patrons that you're serving. Like, we are talking about the power dynamics within their space and the ways that they've been harmed or they're causing harm. Beyond that, acknowledging bias. So yes, we're going to talk about all of them together, but we're also going to talk about when patrons come into their bar, do they see Scarlett Sophie Petrie Thompson, me, a little white girl, and they're like, that could be a survivor. That is, we are so conditioned to see young, I mean, I would hope many of us in the space know this, that like, the number one thing that we need to be teaching when we teach prevention is asking the question, who are we seeing as vulnerable people? And if the staff is looking at a young white woman and a young black woman, and they're seeing the young black woman as someone who is strong and not vulnerable and doesn't need help, that immediately is going to mean that harm can escalate and happen to that person without the staff ever intervening. So we really, and then like, you know, when they see a big cis man and a cis woman walk in, and they're immediately like clocking the cis man, or they're watching the men of color specifically, and they're not looking at like the young queer white woman who's like harassing other women. Like, there are so, like, I mean, I could go on for 7 hours with all of the nuances of survivorship. But that is a really key part of what we teach in this prevention programming, is like, we need to completely shift all of those implicit biases about who we're seeing as vulnerable in our spaces.
Okay, does it acknowledge the power dynamics that may prevent people from speaking up and or intervening in ways that we are suggesting, and do we offer alternatives? So our staffs are mixed between salaried and tipped employees. The impact that the customer is always right mentality has had on our industry is incredibly harmful. Power dynamics are rife. It's also not clear cut. Like, there are often, like, maybe the guy who is my coworker also makes the schedule. This is a real one. It makes the schedule, and I can't dismiss his flirting because he's going to take Saturday nights away, and that's how I pay my rent, right? So it's very the power dynamics are incredibly complex. They are not one directional; they are multi-directional, and we have to adapt to that. Did I cover all that? Great.
I'll also share, we've had examples where we have nightlife professionals who come to us because they reported sexual harassment or they talk about it. And no, they don't get retaliated against directly. Well, they do. But it turns into, 1 month later, you're like 30 minutes late, maybe because of the train. Now we're going to use that to fire you, right? So it's not even like a direct thing. The business tries to cover itself, but they are able to silence it by, getting out or making the folks uncomfortable, right, who are speaking up about this thing when we're a family.
Also, even well-intentioned things, right? Like, I've reported about a coworker that is harassing me. Okay, well, then we'll just make sure that you don't work on the same shifts together. But they have more seniority, so they're keeping the good shifts, and I've now been moved on. So I still have my job. On paper, I haven't been retaliated against. On paper, I've actually been supported, but I'm not going to come forward because I know I'm going to lose my bottom line. Or a customer, I see this one a lot where like bars will be like, oh yeah, we just don't let the girls close by themselves. That takes money out of our pocket, right? That means I'm getting cut earlier and I'm losing 3 hours of my shift because I have to go home early because you won't hire security, etc.
And so Amy talked about this earlier, but does it offer tangible, actionable, and industry-specific interventions, right? This is a unique population. This is a population full of folks who are from underserved, marginalized communities a lot of the time. And then there's just so much diversity, right? We've got BDSM communities, polyplay communities that do education in their basements about sex ed. We've got, like Amy said, Dominican communities where if you don't speak Spanish, you're not going to be able to get a drink or make an order, right? You can go down to Greenwich Village in Lower Manhattan where all the LGBTQ folks are, or you can go down to Wall Street with the financial bros with the black cards who have a different type of privilege and power.
Those are so fun.
Right? And that's one of the really cool things about New York City's nightlife is that our approach, we've had to learn to create tailorable and adaptable curricula. And that is what makes our curricula so replicable in really diverse communities, that ability to tailor and adapt it. So it's even required us to push our ideas around evidence-based, what replicable really means and accessible really means. We'll talk about Victoria Banyard later, but really learning to lean into these organizational change frameworks, pivoting and adapting has been really, really helpful to allow us to look at the essential elements of our curricula and then figure out what can we adapt, how can we meaningfully engage and include the folks with us so that we can get all of that venue-specific information we need in real time.
Okay, I'm gonna do this quick. As we've said a million times, what we have learned is it can't be one size fits all. It has to be adaptable, flexible, and meet dynamic needs of the community and the sub-communities. So we're gonna talk about 3 core components of this is my Virgo self was like, we need 3 core components to teach. But these are the 3 things that we kind of pulled out as these are translatable to a lot of other prevention folks and even response people. But building an equitable program through number 1, community engagement, next curriculum development, and then equitable facilitation. And we're gonna go through each one of these, and at the end of each one, we're gonna kind of toss it to you to talk at your table about how is this relevant to your work? Does this even make sense in your work? How would you do it in your work? So just clock that, because that's coming your way pretty soon. So we're gonna start with community engagement.
Thank you, Scarlett. And so for us, we really focus on meaningfully engaging in the communities that we work with. Like I said, we're working with historically underrepresented, marginalized communities. And for us, we look at inclusion as a crucial prevention strategy. For us, inclusion is a prerequisite to equity. And in order to advance equity, it's essential that we meaningfully include those that we serve in the process, right? It helps reduce risk. It helps make sure that our stuff is more relevant to the community, but especially when you're working with historically underserved communities. When you include them, that's an empowering and corrective experience, right? I cannot stress enough the importance of understanding history and the pattern of harm that these folks have experienced. So by including them from the beginning, we show that we are different. We show that we're different than all the other institutions or people who have solutions, who aren't from the community and are gonna come in and do it for you rather than with you, right? Inclusion is about behaviors and it's action oriented, right? And as prevention trainers, we all know we need to go beyond cognitions. We need to go beyond raising awareness into action. So that's another reason we love looking at inclusion and things like nudge theory even to find the choice architecture in every space so that we can really make this change accessible. Inclusion is also judged by those on the receiving ends of your actions or services. We're talking about operationalizing inclusion and actually doing it. If you are a supervisor, if you're an executive director, if you're a program manager, if you're a facilitator, you have to ask the people that you're working with if you're inclusive. And if they say no, then we're not. And this is understandable. Like we said, there is no one size fits all. So if you want to measure how inclusive you are, start asking in supervisions. Start asking the folks that you're working with, right? Over a long period of time. And so for us, a lot of what we do, and we'll get into this more, is we plan, implement, and evaluate our prevention programming with them, rather than for them. And again, like I said, this helps us reduce risk. This helps increase buy-in. This helps increase the relevance of our work. And what we found is that if you just put in a little bit more work to include them, a little bit more at the beginning, there's a lot less that you have to correct in the end. Right? Especially if all you're doing is an outcome evaluation. So that creates fertile ground for a much more productive, relevant, and successful partnership and growth.
Building equity through community engagement. Okay, so this is the Nightlife arm, the collective that I was talking about. So I say it's multi-pronged. This is one of our places that we have learned as we've gone. We are constantly trying to figure out how to retain our nightlife professionals. There is a ton of turnover in the industry. We are recognizing that we are asking people to be consistently engaged with us while maintaining 2 to 3 other jobs. So multi-pronged in that our structure is that we have, our goal structure. We have a group of health equity consultants, yes, that are paid, that are on the staff. They have 10 hours a week. It's amazing. It's changed everything. Then we have the Nightlife Collective, which can sometimes be people we pay. We find a grant to bring them in to co-build with us a specialty workshop. Maybe it's somebody that we've engaged, somebody who's active in the kink and sex work community in New York. We're going to do a specific workshop for that. So we found funding for a short contract, project-based contract. And then we do have a base of volunteers that we can then tap to be like, hey, do you want to come be a bystander at this party? They need 13 people. So it's a mix of paid and volunteer. This allows us to engage people, meet people where they're at, right? So that we can say hey, we don't need you to show up for a meeting at 2 p.m. every Tuesday in order to be involved in this, because we know that I don't know what my schedule is on Tuesday until the Sunday before sometimes if I'm working lunch or working dinner. So how do we make our flexibility for people to actually stay engaged in a consistent way? The collective meetings are something that we do, and by do, I mean have tried to do. But they're up and running again now, post-COVID. It's great. So these are, it's a meeting. We do a happy hour. We go to one of our bars that we've trained. We buy the first round of drinks. We invite everybody to come out. This is an opportunity for us to hang out, build community. It's also a chance for us to be like, how's it going out there? What's been coming up in your venues? What patterns are you seeing? What other resources do you need? What tools do you need? What did we not go in depth enough in our 101? And you want to bring us back for your venue because you're noticing this pattern, and we're going to build a training for you that's level 2. Resource sharing is also about what was it that made me think of this last night? Go to the community for, it was because I went to the screening of that short film. Did anybody see that? Was anybody there for that? And somebody was talking about these efforts have been in place for decades, and the community has resources built. We have resource guides for our play parties where we say, if something happens, this is the structure, this is what we do. So how are we going in and seeing what the community has already built and amplify it and bring resource to it, as opposed to coming in with something that we have and saying, here, use this. Right? So go to the things that and this allows us, and we see this happen all the time, of somebody's oh, I have a friend that's doing a harm reduction thing with Dance Safe. We can bring them in and partner with you. And then, oh, I have this person that's a therapist and they're offering this, so maybe you can go to see them. Or, oh, I do this thing on sobriety and nightlife, right? So everybody's brilliant, and this gives us a chance to kind of swap what everybody's working on. Post-training follow-up, I feel like I covered that. Discuss urgent and emergent needs and trends in nightlife. Our curriculum changed so much in post-COVID, as all of our staffs and our venues were working in COVID conditions, we have to respond to that, right? We are constantly adapting our curriculum, but this can also be like, hey, this neighborhood has a person that's being a problem. How are we spreading the word, offering this specific neighborhood support, connecting the venues to each other so they can call if they need it? Bushwick has a new serial killer. It's the whole thing. Continuing education, so this is where we will actually do our, if we've brought in a consultant to build a specialty training, then we do these at the meeting. So maybe 1 month we're doing, what are some of the ones we've done?
We've done stuff with the Drug Policy Alliance to talk about raising awareness for drugs. We've brought in folks to talk about immigration. We've brought in continuing eds at bars. We've trained to talk about supporting queer communities. Whatever they request, we will try to find someone who has a specialty and experience there and bring them there for that happy hour. It's what they requested, so we bring it.
Recruitment, this is where we can say, bring your friends, come hang out with us. Ongoing feedback and improvement. We get a lot of feedback in these spaces of just like, hey, we didn't love how that went. This didn't go down well in our space. And a lot of times that means we can come back and do it better. And to support our venues, we bring them money, we bring them business, and it's a good time.
Okay, I promised you were gonna talk to each other, and now you get to talk to each other. Or you don't have to if you don't want to. So let's just take a second. If you want to do this, I know, listen, I've been in so many breakouts this week, and also when you're sitting in the rows, it can be difficult. So if it's helpful to like turn to the two behind you or manipulate it however you wish, but just with the people around you. Say who you are, share your names, your pronouns if you wish, and just like, what are you doing? Are you in prevention, response? Are you not in the nonprofit world? That would be awesome if there are some non-nonprofit people here. And they're like, take some time, get to know each other. And then ask yourselves and each other, how are you meaningfully engaging your community? If you are the community that you serve, if you represent that community, how do you feel your organization conducts outreach to the folks in your community? How could we do better? What is working? What would a collective of people that you serve look like? So just take as much time as you want. And also, if you don't want to talk about any of these questions and you just want to like gab, that's fine too. But yeah, take some time. We're going to come around too. We want to hear from all of you now. Let's just, anybody have any big thoughts or small thoughts about what community engagement can look like in your community? Just raise your hand. We love, Eric doesn't have a handheld, so he can't run it to people, but he loves running long legs.
Hello. Okay.
So who, raise your hand. You could make
Thoughts on community?
Sarah.
It's broken.
So this actually came up in the workshop we were in before this too, about trust in communities. So we have worked really, this is it. This is all three of us for one region, worked really hard for like 5 years now in the community that we're in, for them to trust us to do this work with them. So that means a lot of meetings, a lot of community engagement. But that's what we have found has been the best way to get them to trust us, to work with them in their nightlife spaces. We're Long Island, so it's not like New York City in that it's like super diverse in some areas, but we've been able to like really engage the community that we work with just by showing up, and showing up as like a former bartender. So that is the other part that's super relatable, is I can get up there and talk about working in nightlife, because I used to, so I use those experiences. But yeah, so that's how we do it, or try to.
Hey, you're doing it.
We love...
I have to go to the bar and have a drink so they see me. It's not.
Yeah.
We'll share it. Who else?
Community engagement.
Let's go.
Thank you. Mine isn't specific to nightlife, but I'm in Frederick County, Maryland, which is the second largest county in the state. And we have an urban downtown. We have family farms, very rural areas. And then we have like a big DC commuter population. So What we've done is engage with the public libraries, because there's one in basically every community. That's a trusted resource. The librarians, they know the teenagers, they know the kids, they know the families that are coming in. And it's also a space that we can use for free. And they're doing advertising for us, so it saves us a lot of money. And then we just get on their programming schedule, and then it gets us out there further than if I'm just trying to figure out where can I do programming. So that's been a big help for us.
I love a strength space.
Yeah, meeting people like where there's already something happening. It's the best.
Also, like, very great you don't work in nightlife. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah, non-nightlife stuff.
I'm with a nonprofit in violence prevention nonprofit in Santa Fe, and we teach classes in verbal de-escalation and boundary setting, and also self-defense, public classes. And so I've been thinking more, just as we've been talking, about ways, because Santa Fe, it feels like everyone in Santa Fe is connected through six, I go to yoga with them, or I work with, there's all these different connections, and just wondering about how to ask people who take our public classes how they're connected in the community, and then have that be an inroad into those different parts of the community.
Yes, thank you. We love that. Yep, I'm coming. We love asking, what do you do after you leave here, and then bringing it there.
Hi, my name's Liz. I work at a domestic violence shelter in Iowa City, Iowa. I'm sorry, better? Okay, so I work in the shelter, and our community engagement department is relatively new within the last 7 years overall of our history. I'm a college town, but it's Iowa, so right now our community engagement during the summer is involving county fairs. And that's where we get out in the community. We see all sorts of different folks, from people who don't believe domestic violence exists to places to add new partnerships. And so that's been really exciting this summer.
That is awesome. I'm a Minnesotan, and we love the Minnesota State Fair. Yeah, Midwest. Okay, we're gonna keep going because we have so much content. Oh yeah, and are so far behind. Okay, are we ready for the next slide? Here we go. Okay, that was a little moment for you all. What about the money? I know, listen. Our fundraiser is laughing so hard right now. Kristen, shout out. Money. So listen, we don't have a ton of it. I think we can all relate to that. But we have found ways to make this work with the limited funding opportunities that we have. So, number one, diverse pool of funding. I'm at the Alliance, they're at CVTC. We use totally different budgets and totally different organizations to fundraise and then split up that money. So that allows for so much more flexibility in unrestricted funding when we can find it. Beyond that, when we do find funding, the first thing that we focus on before money for hats and supplies and...
I said this to them last night. I was like, am I allowed to say in this room, I don't come from a nonprofit background, I'm a bartender. What the fuck are y'all doing with all these swag? And I mean it. I'm so confused by how money is spent. That the number of times that we've had hey, I want some money to give to this person in the community to build a curriculum, or hook somebody up with a little help because they did just report and they are being blacklisted and we need to help them transition. And we're like, that's unrealistic. We don't have money for that. But look at the new tote bags that we have. And I'm like, okay. And I've learned a lot. I love the tote bags. I do. I've learned a lot. I understand things better now. And this part I feel is part of the stuff that we shouldn't put on the recording, but we figure it out. We do figure it out. The diverse pool of funding allows us to be okay, we have to provide this for this grant, but we also have private funding. We also do fundraisers with our community so that we have a little cash flow to do the stuff like what I was just saying. So we're not dependent on one thing that we have to be. This also allows us to talk about things really realistically, right? we might be under a grant that is not gonna be cool with us doing sex worker research, but I can fund that with other things.
Okay. Thank you. No. She loves the hats. So we also, like we were saying, instead of when we can, because I know also our budget person is here too. There are different lines. I know there's different budget lines, but when we write our proposals and when we try to plan in advance, the first thing we do is we put in money for contract-based work with nightlife workers, and we pay every single nightlife worker that we work with, because just the practice of inequity and not hiring and paying the communities that we are working with is like so unethical and so beyond our praxis, I would say. But that's hard. So we really have to choose, like, okay, we have a very limited money. We're gonna put aside these $4,000 and we're gonna spread it, and we're gonna hire 4 different nightlife professionals, and they're gonna develop this curriculum, and then we're gonna find more money next year so they can come and facilitate it. So it's a very, like, you do it as you go, but it's working for us. Also finding health equity specific funding sources. The theme of this freaking conference is equity in action. So like, let's get some more like health equity money available to everybody. And then finally, like I said, the money goes into creating things that can then live beyond. So it's not just things that, we're gonna do one time and then discard. It's like paying people to help us build what OutSmart is and what we can provide.
Contract-based work is actually great because nightlife folks, it's very seasonal. So doing like project-based like stipends or payments actually works out really, really well for them. So I got a question. Has anyone else struggled implementing evidence-based strategies into your work on the ground? Yeah. Does anyone want to say really quick what some of those challenges can be? It's okay, we got funders in the room.
So nightlife, so time. It's a long, our curriculum that we use is different. It's, a chunk of time to take out. So the scheduling and getting everybody in the room and the tracking and half of my staff can come to this, but the other half is going to go down the block next week and so it's time consuming, not only for them, but for us. We just finished Alive After 5 season for the street festival near us, and we train a lot of the bars and restaurants. And like by August, I'm like, I need a month off of work. So not only for them, but for us as a very limited staff, that has been really hard. And also like we've talked about, like different places, different vibes. So meeting their needs sometimes can feel difficult, that like we feel like we need to do a little more, or they're not getting everything out of the curriculum that we would want them to, because there's like stuff that they're not even ready for it. Like we just trained a place where we walked out and we were like, we feel like we need to go back in, and do a little more work in different areas. So that can feel hard and overwhelming.
Thank you so much. One thing I thought of today was that part of the reality is things that are evidence-based aren't necessarily reality-based, right? With capacity limitations, the real dynamic nature of the world, it doesn't always fit. That's why it's important to have that flexibility.
That's basically what I was going to say. And also, I work with young people, and it's boring. It's like, it's not fun. It's easy, I know what I'm saying, but then translating that into something that's realistic does not always connect.
Yeah. Nightlife folks are always telling us, we get the 101. We actually did a 2018 review of our curricula, and we realized the intro, terms, definitions, all that is where the least amount of learning occurs. And consistently asking, go beyond these facts and stats and go into the gray, because that's where we need help. It's okay. I'm joking.
I work in Arizona for the State Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. But jumping off of what you said, working with kids or working with high schoolers, they don't love when we talk about like contraception because it's mostly abstinence-based education. But then also, even talking to high school students about like healthy relationships, we give them, the little cards and we give them all the information, but sometimes they just don't care. They're like, I don't care what this adult has to say to me. And I'm like, fair. I'll cry about it later at home. But it is sometimes really hard to make it engaging. Yeah. Exactly.
right? And this is why so much of our prevention is about trying to figure out what that intrinsic motivation is. One of my favorite quotes from an organizational change master, Peter Drucker, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we saw that really live and clear across the country during COVID. You can have a vaccine, you can have the answer right in front of you, but if the community doesn't know you, they don't have a good relationship, if you haven't tended to the historical inequities and troubles between the system and the community, they're not going to use that solution that you have, right?
Thanks. I work from like an organization. It's a rape crisis center in Wilmington, North Carolina. We've done a little more outreach, more awareness, consent messaging, but we're based in the schools. And our biggest struggle is, like, for a couple of years now, we've had a really strong school board that's like, yeah, let's do the programming. This is amazing. Like, let's put it into policy change. And then you get a new school board and things completely change. So the sustainability of programming and the fact that it doesn't last kind of causes burnout and like all of that extra stuff. So like trying to make evidence-based strategies actually last, but still adapt them, but still all of the things. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to go with this last one just for time. My apologies.
So I'm with the coalition in Louisiana, and one thing that I've found is that, you know, something can be evidence-based, it could be rigorously evaluated, but if it was rigorously evaluated for a suburban majority white school in a very different state, that doesn't do me any good. You know, it's not rigorously evaluated with the group that I'm talking to.
Bingo.
And that's on what?
Bingo.
Period. Nah, I work with a middle school. It's 98% black. You have a large amount of students who are from West African or Caribbean households, Muslim households. So many of them have an incarcerated parent or a parent who's justice involved, right? That community is different. The conversation is different. In community, we say there's a very real conversation that's not being had. And those of us who know what that means, knows what that means. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I highly suggest looking at the Valor US webinar from Victoria Banyard, where they talk about strengths-based prevention, where they go into these meta-analyses of these evidence-supported curricula and actually show that there's a lot of confirmation bias, especially when the developers are the one making money off of the curriculum that they created, right? And that applies for us too. That's why our accountability is making sure that we are meaningfully including and engaging the community as a check to us, right? Yeah, but read Strengths-Based Prevention. I'm always here to talk about it. Valor US has a free webinar on it. It's amazing. And OutSmart has had a great opportunity to actually work with Victoria Banyard's team in our work. So they've been really helpful.
Yeah, we have 3 microphones now.
Okay.
Shout out to our tech people. They're
All right.
awesome.
And so,
thank you. They are running through
and so
this
just
place.
some quick tenets of what we believe makes an equitable nightlife curriculum, and maybe this will be helpful for you all as well. We are culturally humble, and that's the mindset. We go in with cultural humility because we know there's a lot that we don't know. We know that there's an entire set of knowledge, wisdom, and judgment that you can't have if you're not in it with the community, right? And so the action is to be culturally inclusive, right? We use those strengths and what's there. And we're evidence informed, right? We love evidence, we love research, right? It's totally valid. But for us, it's the different level of like rigor. For us, we love evidence, and what's equally important is that knowledge, wisdom, and judgment of the people in the room, because they're the ones who are going to be doing the work after we're gone, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we're including that very relevant cultural venue-specific information so that our stuff is actionable. We're strengths-based and we're trauma-informed. I've heard a lot of this over the conference, right? A lot of our work, especially in the research, we focus on what's not there. We focus on what they don't have. And clinically, right, folks know like this can be a recipe for facilitating a downward spiral, right? It can be a path toward burnout. So we often like to look for those strengths. I think that's part of our expertise, being able to look at the strengths and the things that are already there and folding prevention strategies into what they already have, right? And that's much less resource intensive. Our core curricula is adaptable, and it provides a menu of programming options, just like we would work with any survivor, right? You give them that menu of options because there's no one size fits all. So we have our comprehensive prevention curricula. We also have an hour-and-a-half sexual harassment training, or we can do just an hour bystander training, or we can host a collective meeting, or we can provide bystanders who can help de-escalate and coordinate with security at your events. Some venues, they can't do any of that. And they're like, you know what, we will host a fundraiser for you, or we will post on social media for you, right? So there are any number of ways that folks can get involved, because that curriculum, again, it is longer. So maybe our foot in the door is going to come from that other type of engagement that we offer. Our scenarios are realistic. We don't come with pre-written scenarios. We ask them, what does it look like in this space? What are scenarios that you want to talk about? And a way that we make it safer for folks is we give them an option to anonymize the scenarios that they write down on pieces of paper. And then we use those scenarios that we gathered from the people in the room in the role plays that we're doing later, right? That extra piece helps make it much more relevant. And not only is it relevant during that training, we take those scenarios and we keep them across venues. So now we have a stack of scenarios directly from nightlife professionals that allow us to identify patterns and trends across the community, across our many trainings that we've done. It's literally like huge stack. And then also, our bystander intervention strategies acknowledge positionality and the safety of the individual, and it encourages coordination among groups. We are trauma-informed in our bystander intervention. We realize that you might be scared. You might not know what to do. You might not be there, right? And so we've even had venues who are like, after an incident or after your training, we started having weekly incident report meetings and asking people what happened, what do you need, right? You can follow up after an incident with a survivor who might need help. A lot of times, survivors will go to the venues after an incident and ask for further help, and then they'll call us, right? But we want to acknowledge things even like identity in this space, right? An undocumented person might not be the person who feels comfortable intervening in a situation where the police are likely to be involved, right? Even our identities in this room, are going to affect our intervention strategies because of our connection to the communities we have. All right, so we're always thinking about that, and then just really, we don't just focus on the individual bystander. We're going to ask, who's the mean bartender? Who's the person who's good at de-escalating? Who's the person that can be really supportive of a survivor, or the person who can be sarcastic like Amy and use a lot of humor to help de-escalate a situation? So we talk about interventions they can use, and then we are having that conversation with them to learn about who feels safe when, right? Who can we tap into on this shift if there's a situation where I, Eric, don't feel comfortable because I'm tall, but I'm a small, skinny dude, and I won't feel comfortable maybe going in towards like a 300-pound, bodybuilder who might be getting a little aggressive. And then we always provide connection to accessible support services. We are nonprofits. We give free, low-cost, confidential services. So we always make sure we have that menu of options available. And our website is a great referral source. We have a menu of resources that are industry-specific, but also supportive of survivors.
Also, the accessible support services also is like alternatives to calling the police in nightlife that we have to talk about, that we're not going to do that, and we encourage not doing that, and talk about other options.
And in these marginalized communities, sometimes if your venue calls the cops, now you're labeled as a venue that calls the cops. Right, and so community will feel less safe there, right? So it even affects the business's bottom line. So which is the money. So we gotta provide more options outside of that.
Is it me? It's me.
Yeah, all you.
Okay. I think we've mentioned this. Our content was and is and will always be co-created by all of the experts in the room, including the Nightlife pros. Ongoing evaluation and adaptation. We're constantly evolving it. We're constantly adapting it by venue and also just all the time. Inclusive materials, our curriculum includes diverse examples, scenarios, perspectives. Again, as Eric said, this is derived from our trainings and on-the-ground experiences. I think somebody was talking about consent messaging. I think that these can be the big pitfalls of community outreach, is that the messaging is dumb. And it doesn't feel like, it's just silly. It just feels boring and silly. And I think the same is true for scenarios. They have to feel like you can be like, oh yeah, that is something that happened recently. And then health equity funding for supplemental programming. This is where we bring in the consultants for a project-based curriculum build or, for an event or a party or something like that.
What does curriculum look like for you? We're gonna take, we tend to run over time.
It happens every time.
It's 4:36, so we still got some time. I think let's take a few minutes. We're not gonna do a share out, but we'll have a share at your table, because I'm curious, we're gonna come around and listen. Will you click forward? all of you are doing very different things, and some of us have handed down curriculums. I totally get that. I know it sounds like a lot of people in the room do. So just a few questions to ask. Who's telling you that you have to do that curriculum? Oftentimes it's our funders, so we understand that. And is there room? Is there room for pushback? Is there room for an alternative? And within that, if there is no room, how do we balance flexibility and fidelity? How do we kind of, blur the edges a little bit of the mandated curriculum to make it fit? If you are growing your own curriculum, which is really fun and awesome, who is a part of the development? Who have you asked for feedback? Does it grow and change? And if you're like, I don't do this and I'm not a facilitator, that's fine. You can talk about whatever you want. Or you can talk about, like, if you have participated, like a lot of us have done, like bringing in the bystander, or green dot, or whatever, like how has that experience been for you? Or you can just chit chat about other things. But take like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then we're gonna come back for every single one of those questions.
Right. One of the things we've really noticed in Nightlife curriculums, but really quickly before you start talking, that when people tell us that they've engaged Nightlife and then we dig a little further, they've engaged owners and managers and no one else, right? We've not talked to any of the actual on the ground. So in talking about like who made your curriculum and asking those questions, that to just go a little deeper with it. Go, sorry, I didn't time that well. Let's talk about facilitation. We're not gonna do this. But that's Eric's Bitmoji, isn't it cute? It's the highlight of the F game is Eric's Bitmoji. Okay, you kick this off. Huh? This is all you, baby. Oh, no, we just said Eric's gonna take the first half of this. Ugh. All right, things we do. No, okay, I'm sorry. Co-facilitation model, we've talked about this. Always do things with a Nightlife professional and a preventionist. We also do our best to have an advocate there in case anybody needs to step out, needs some support, because we recognize that like when we're talking about this, a lot of times people are in the rooms with people who have harmed them. Yeah. Facilitators are paid for their time. We learned this the hard way. Through me. This was basically like I was volunteering solely and I would show up and Eric and I would facilitate training and then I'd have to go to my job. And Eric was getting paid for it and I still had to go to my job. So the CVTC found a way to create a position for me that was flexible and that puts me on a consultant contract and pays me for my time, and it's amazing and it has changed the way that we've been able to engage Nightlife. Ongoing recruitment of a diverse team of facilitators. I feel like a lot of the stuff that when you did start talking about like community engagement, it's like you're forming individual relationships. That's what this is. That's ongoing community engagement, which means that like the more people in more positions in different places around are gonna bring more people in. Eric, you were gonna take this.
Yeah, and so for each training, we sort of we'll look at it like the clinicians do at my office, right? You get a case, we talk to them, we learn about them, and then we'll come together and figure out, based on our group of facilitators, who has the experience, the expertise, and availability. All right, that's often a big factor.
Truth.
To see who might be best able to serve this venue, right? Sometimes it's going to need a Spanish facilitation, right? And so one of the things we did with Health Equity, we did a Spanish language translation and a cultural translation, right? To include things like machismo, to talk about more family community values and include some of these concepts around consent. And it's great because we had facilitators, from Mexico, Colombia, and Puerto Rico coming together from different communities who had a fun time creating this new language that they didn't really have before. So it was really great.
We also recognize that can very easily come up on tokenism, and that people are being sent in to do emotional labor in ways that they may not have capacity for. So we have also implemented consent and capacity check-ins amongst our facilitators to be like, hey, we are being really mindful that Eric and I are co-facilitating because we kind of know that this is a Wall Street bar and the bros are gonna hear from Eric more than they're gonna hear from me, right? But Eric might be like, I don't have it today. Like I'm a little tapped on it today. So we do check in with each other to be like, how is your capacity for emotional labor around identity and around positionality?
And we are very formative in our approach. Like I said, we have these essential elements that we're going to hit on our curriculum. Thank you. At the same time, our style is very participatory. It's very interactive, so we're constantly asking the audience question. We're constantly saying, Amy, how is this nightlife? Right? We're always asking, how does this come up in your space? What are the examples that you see here, right? And so the information that it gives us helps to guide the training where it needs to go, which is a space that's more relevant to what's coming up for them, right? We don't want to make those assumptions. So just by being more inclusive facilitators, we get that nuance, we get that context, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the next 15 minutes.
Some of the facilitator moves we implement, we go to them, we go to their space. They don't have to come to us. That also allows us to be like, oh, yeah, there's the dark spot. Oh, you have a lot of flat surfaces in your bathroom. Do people do a lot of cocaine here? Let's talk about it. Establish accessible group norms. We do group norms, but again, we do them in a way that people are not going to be like, oh God, we're about to get lectured to, aren't we? We make them very fun. Eric does a like, who here wants to be an asshole to me or Amy? Like talking about respect, and like we find a way to do it that is bantery. You want to talk about cover for candor? That one's yours.
Yeah, like what are the ways that you as facilitators provide cover so that the folks can actually feel candid, especially with the power dynamics in the room? And group norms is one common thing that all of us probably do that helps do that. Also, finding ways to anonymize participation. When we ask them for those scenarios, we're having you write it down on an individual index card, and if you don't want it shared aloud because they'll know who it is, you just put an X in the circle. I mean, an X on the card. We love to tell facilitators, do less telling, right? Telling is a bias that we have in our facilitation style here. We love an expert who's gonna come, share a lot of information in a way that's efficient, but not necessarily effective. That's like the lecture style. And I can say I did well because I have the words on the slide that show I hit my learning objectives, but that might not be the best learning. And so we do a lot of listening and learning from the folks in the room. They are the experts. And so Amy can masterfully sit at the beginning of a facilitation and she's like, yo, where are the dark spots? What's the bathroom like? Do we do drugs here, right? What is your rotation like? Do you have floaters going around this space? When's security here? Do you scan IDs? We have a venue that doesn't scan during the week, but because of incidents and high volume on the weekend, and the manager, they will only scan on the weekends and then they delete it afterwards, right? So they don't keep that information in their system, right? So there are a lot of ways that we're able to listen and learn to them from the beginning in just 5 minutes. That helps make our training much more accurate, and it helps us save time and make sure that the work we're doing is relevant.
It also that's where we people will start telling us what their issues are, right? When I'm saying who's your clientele, how many regulars do you have versus tourists coming in, people start to tell us where the issues come up, and that allows us to be formative and to be really in real time being like, oh yeah, let's talk about that. And then when we are in the actual slides and then the actual curriculum, we're able to really specifically be like, hey, this applies to that thing that y'all were talking about. Let's talk about what that solution is. Yeah, use humor and levity. We really avoid preciousness. That's trauma-informed, baby. The preciousness is just not gonna get us there. It just doesn't work. It's not our style. And we find that being fun and being approachable and accessible and being human and being like, you can be human here. You don't have to be on your best behavior here. We're just gonna talk about some things.
We also bring fidgets and bubbles.
Yes, we do.
For those of you who don't know, bubbles help regulate you because they require you to take a big breath. So I bring it in my K through 12 stuff. I just don't tell them that they're regulating their breath. It's just blow some bubbles.
It's the best workaround.
You could rotate facilitators. We use diverse engagement methods. Yes, principles of effective prevention programming. We like to practice compassionate accountability, right? These are spaces where anything can come up, and we're gonna we're gonna call people in. We're also gonna make time after the training to have more direct response to folks who might be saying some stuff that is out of touch, we'll say.
And we do this, we always do schedule time after, because it is possible that we have to be like, okay, I'm gonna, just for time, we have to move on, but I'm gonna snag you for a few minutes after because I wanna chat with you about something, because that allows us to have private conversations, but it also allows us for people who may be being harmed in the room by what's being said to know this is being handled and I don't have to do the emotional labor to handle it right now.
Another thing we'll do is say the thing. This is a trauma-informed facilitation strategy. A lot of the time when we do trauma-informed training for teachers over COVID, name, we're all tired and burnt out. Name that we are all isolated and overworked, right? And normalizing that in the conversation so we really are grounding ourselves in the reality of the situation.
This is also saying the thing that so that they don't have to, right? And I are often the ones who will say, hey, let's talk about the history of white women falsely accusing men of color of sexual violence. If we're the ones to say that, that's moving at the speed of trust. That's saying, like, you don't have to be the one to bring that up. It's creating safer spaces.
And so we're also naming and disrupting, power dynamics and, identity, role, all sorts of stuff. We love to model respectful challenging and nuanced teasing out of the gray areas. Like I said, this is something they consistently ask for, beyond the 101 stats and facts, and go into that gray. And one of the reasons we love that co-facilitation model is that if we don't have that advocate, someone can step away and offer support if we need to. But it's also great modeling for people to see, even as facilitators, we can disagree and we can still get through it, and we can still do this training, and we can still bring more perspectives, right? Or we have a wider knowledge base if we have folks with different identities. So we love to have folks who are facilitating with different identities so we have access to that broader knowledge, wisdom, judgment, and experience that we can't have on our own.
And because we're conversational, this happened with us in a training the other day. I was saying something with the vigor of, I know, I'm completely right. And Scarlett was like, actually, my friends and I we're talking about this and this the other day. And I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about that part of it. Hold on. We do that early so that people feel like, oh, we're not just like lip servicing, you can challenge us. Modeling it for people that we are wrong and that we haven't thought, we aren't the experts, allows them to feel safer to challenge us through the rest of the curriculum.
And then we talked about real-time cultural translation. Yeah. We're very interactive, so a lot of that information emerges as we ask for it in the training because we aren't the experts in their space.
Okay, when we talk about no one's the expert, a lot of white people at this conference, a lot of white people in this room, a lot of white people in this field. It's just the truth.
Say the thing.
And we know that white dominant culture is infiltrating every single space that we walk into, every single facilitation that we do. We are actively, especially Amy and I, two white women, we try to never facilitate together because it's like, we walk in and people are like, yeah, classic. Like, it's just such a, so anyway, but that's not even the point of this slide. So one of the norms that we know of white dominant culture is this idea of like the nonprofit written word. Like if it's not written down, if it's not communicated in like standard American English, then it's incorrect or less intelligent. And the alternative to this is that communication is communication. And this is true. Will you click me, please? Thank you. There is no right or wrong. In some communities, like oral storytelling is a huge way that people learn and transfer down information through generations. So that is what we do in Nightlife. Like Nightlife people know so much shit because they just talk to each other during their shifts and because they're connected to a million different communities in the city. So we really try to push against this, and that goes into we try to not use language in our trainings that's just so inaccessible. And then the next thing, which we've said a million times, but the facilitator, there is no expert, and there is, will you click for me? Thank you. The one right way thinking and the idea that the facilitator is the expert. We know that there is no one solution to harm. Prevention's gonna look different for everyone. We walk into the room, and even if it's the most diverse team of facilitators in the world, they will never know all of the participants' experiences and everything that they are bringing to that space. And the first thing we say when we walk into a Nightlife venue is we go, we don't know shit. You are the experts, and we spend the first 15 minutes having them tell us about their space and what the vibes are, because we cannot facilitate if we don't have any of that information. So that's how we work to reject those. There's a million other things we could talk about with this. Always happy to, but that was a quick one. And now I think we're going, yeah.
And so we're just going to give you a quick little preview into some facilitator moves. We all know about breakout groups. Raise your hand or give a woot woot if you use breakout groups. go, right? And so I'm a hardcore facilitator. I have books upon books upon books about straight up facilitator moves if you want to talk. But I just want us to talk a little bit more about things like a small breakout group so that we can maybe use it with a bit more intention, right? So like I said earlier, a lot of our bias here, especially in fields where there's a lot of research and academics, is to choose the lecture style. Hold up. Period. Okay. All right. And so if we look for us, because we want to disrupt these power dynamics where the facilitator is the expert and I have all the knowledge and the wisdom and I'm going to teach you how to change this space, that is indicative of the telling bias in our facilitator style over here in the West. And if I want to disrupt it, right, what would happen if I have a long lecture and I have you all sitting in a group and I say I want to be interactive? If I only have an hour, I can say I'm going to give everyone more time, but maybe I can only give each individual 1 minute, hoping that there are no silences, no pauses, that everyone is going to want to talk. It's going to take me a long time to give each individual 1 minute of conversation, and then I have to go on with my presentation. For me, one thing I love about breakout groups is that I will start by asking the folks that I'm with, what is sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual assault? Define it and give some examples. And in 8 minutes, I can give each person in each of these groups 2 minutes to share, more than I could in an entire setting of this lecture style. I can create a smaller group where someone maybe with a half-baked thought might feel intimidated to talk in the big group, so they're more comfortable talking here. I can do a share out after this and have one person from each group share, which anonymizes the participation so we don't know which individual said what. I can do 8 minutes of a breakout group, follow it with an anonymous poll in case there are folks who are afraid to talk in their group, so I can get those answers in real time, get poll everywhere. I love it. You can get the responses, pull them into spreadsheets to help you further identify trends that come from your trainings. But I can also take this structure and say, hey, I'm going to have leadership here, middle management here, frontline folks here to increase safety. I can also say, hey, if we're in a diverse group of folks, I want you to have cross-functional groups, folks from different orgs, different departments, which creates more opportunities for you to make connections with another department who is also facing racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, because these things are systemic. And you're going to find that another department has probably found a strategy that you can start to replicate or use yourself. Or, as a trauma-informed person, I love breakout groups because it's the space where you can often start undoing that aloneness that people feel when they're not speaking up in their own organizations and they haven't had someone who can validate their experience and be like, oh, I'm experiencing that too, right? So you don't have to do breakout groups, but doing something like a breakout group, it's proof that you can be more efficient, effective, ethical, and equitable in 8 minutes at the beginning of the training. And if I ask them to define and give me examples, I'm learning it in their language. I'm learning scenarios that they are bringing up that I can then put into our role plays and scenarios that we process later in just 8 minutes. And that's just one facilitator move, y'all. So I encourage you, let's talk facilitation books. I have a list that I keep on my laptop for these kinds of presentations, and I will gladly give it to you.
And that's on Eric McGriff.
Period.
One other thing I will say, sorry, this is I know this is so not relevant, but for those who work with teens, just because there were so many in the room who said this, they have so many opinions. And my favorite activity is I say, okay, and I know many of you might have done this side of the room is agree, this side is disagree, this is the middle. It immediately gets them to stand up and put their fucking phones away. And I say, consent is just about sex. And immediately they're so opinionated and then they start arguing with each other and they start being like, oh, but this is literally just these little things that are I will do an entire workshop that is just agree, disagree, unsure, because you can get to the learning the exact same way as you can with slides, or it's better than slides. This is our final question is what does equitable facilitation look like for you? Again, this was just kind of a breakout time to chat, but I do want to push us forward to our final kind of prompt. I know it's freaking 5 o'clock and we're all so exhausted. So if you want to stay and kind of chat about the things from today or even from this week, especially related to community engagement equitable facilitation or curriculum development. If you have some thoughts about like, oh, this does not work for me, Scarlett, Amy, Eric, shut up, or this is amazing and I'm going to take this back to my community, we encourage you, the things that you're like, I really like this and I'm inspired by this, to write it on a little sticky note. You have a bunch at your tables, and put them on these pieces of paper around the room if you choose to, and you can chat about it, or you could just go back to your room and take a nap, because I know we're all really tired.
Or give us an idea or a resource or something that you're doing, right? Leverage those collective strengths, knowledge, wisdom we all have. Give us an idea, and then everyone can walk around and look at those sticky notes.
Also, we are here for questions if people want to stay and ask any questions. Period.
And thank you.
And we're sorry that we came up against the time.
So I have a question. So I'm from a funding agency, so I don't.
We love you.
So do you guys do your nightlife trainings to just bars and restaurants, or do you do it with promoters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done promoters, we've done security companies, because in New York there's weird insurance stuff that like. We trained HR firms. We've done groups of DJs.
So it's a wide range.
We work with groups that do play parties and sex parties. We've done everything.
They have to cut the mics, so we are going to continue without the mics.
Okay, sorry. Here you go.
But if you have questions, please ask them. We can come to you.